waiting.
She's a voyeur.
Fletcher, is that you?
I saw Pennywise in 2003 at the Toronto stop of the Warped Tour. I remember everything about that day, but one image in particular is burned into this mind forever. That image, Warriors, is how teeny tiny a little guitar looks in the hands of Fletcher from Pennywise. It was like watching a mythical cryptid appear in front of me. Quick, somebody call Wendigoon. This really should be his YouTube video to make. This shit was surreal. This is what I imagined seeing Bigfoot would be like, except for in my case, it was a 6'5", hammered and grizzled chunk of a human being just up there banging out relatively tight punk rock tunes. Today's video is all about that guy's band. So today's the day I think we talk about these Hermosa Beach punkers that most people call Pennywise. I call them Pennywise too. In this case, I'm most people. Hey, hi, hello, 1%ers. Welcome to the clubhouse. I'm the cult leader. I'm the almighty. God damn it. I'm the host of the show. My name is Dan Frampton. And let me tell you, today, I am not friggin' around. I'm sitting on twos and standing on business. We recently hit 20,000 subscribers on this channel, and that's all thanks to you grimy ass motherfuckers out there. But now we got our sights set on golden goose numbers. We are firmly planted with our gaze in the horizon of 100K. Rev those engines. Let's ride, warriors. Likes and subs. Let's go. In the late 80s, when everybody was either injecting Diet Pepsi directly into their heart or coked out of their friggin' gourd, Pennywise started their drunken, violent, and belligerent road to a punk rock legacy. Every DIY band needs to be industrious enough to scrape together the people and equipment enough to run a punk rock show. Back in the late 80s, Pennywise had one of the most interesting and unbelievable ways I've ever heard about someone going about this. They did what they called the 4th of July tradition. To get an idea of the kind of band Pennywise was in those early days, all we have to do is take a look at that batshit crazy tradition. A random house would be chosen. Not a member of the community, not a punk rock squat, just a random house in a suburban block. It was just some house, and Fletcher would show up knowing that people wanted to party on the 4th, and he came with a hell of a pitch. This dude was a punk rock businessman right off the bat, going door to door selling punk rock. But basically what he did was promise a party. He was like, hey fellow neighbor, I'm gonna bring a couple kegs and a couple people to your backyard if you want to have a party. You down with that? And the neighbor, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, looking up at this 6'5" beast, of course they're gonna say, yeah, sure, of course, yeah, you come on through, use our backyard for sure. But what they didn't know was what Fletcher meant was they were gonna throw a punk rock shindig with about 300 shirtless maniacs just flopping around like a bunch of trout in the Sahara Desert. Fletcher promised a memorable 4th of July, and I think he delivered every single time Independence Day rolled around. They'd continue this tradition for a couple years until people started to catch on to their shenanigans. You see, they became kind of known for harm and destruction in Southern California, and the residential communities weren't the only places to ban Pennywise. Their reputation of violence and belligerence got them banned from such clubs as the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Troubadour. When Fletcher tells this story about being banned from these places, he does so with a big grin stretching across his face. That sly motherfucker. I'm not here to waste your time with a whole band bio puff piece and go album by album. That shit is for quitters. Pennywise is much more interesting than the contents of their albums. But I do have to talk about their records a little bit. They are a pivotal element to what make Pennywise Pennywise. Their first full length came out in '91, and subsequently every 2 years a new release would follow. They were trying to keep up with that Bad Religion model, and at the time it was very much working for Pennywise. In the 90s, Blink-182, The Offspring, and Green Day came up beside other California skate punkers and blasted into the mainstream as the grunge era fizzled out. In my opinion, those mainstream bands wouldn't have broke through if it wasn't for the other bands that made that scene so hot to begin with. Those bands being Pennywise, alongside other rapscallions like NoFX, Lagwagon, Rancid, and the aforementioned Bad Religion. Pennywise would gain notoriety and popularity through the 90s by getting signed to Brett Gurewitz of Bad Religion's label, a little label you might have heard of called Epitaph Records. This partnership would be beneficial to Pennywise due to the annual compilation CDs Epitaph released called Punk-O-Rama. These Punk-O-Rama CDs would find their way into every lower class and middle class suburban home at least once throughout their run. The consistent full-length projects in conjunction with these compilations would catapult Pennywise from mere neighborhood ne'er-do-wells to the very tippy top of the punk rock food chain for a bit. If only there was an annual touring festival that brought all these bands to these lower and middle class fans. Damn. Duh, it was called the Warped Tour. It definitely existed. The punk rock petri dish in the 90s was flourishing. It had the bands, it had the fans, it had the labels, it had the tours, and it was all a perfect mixture. Alongside all of that was the extreme sports at the time. We had a recipe for some serious radical behavior. And I'm not talking about political radical, I'm just talking about radical. You dig? The Warped Tour would ultimately be an excuse to take the debaucherous nature of Pennywise on the road in the most extravagant way possible. Like, who let this happen? Nobody in their right mind would sign off on this today, especially given the fact we know their history. But Fletcher is a 6'5" mass of humanity, and it's hard to say no to a guy like that, so I'm sure they're just like, yeah, come on to Warped Tour. There are two crucial Pennywise stories from Warped Tour that paint the picture of what it was like for Fletcher and the gang when they were on tour. You see, Fletcher always wanted to do the Sex Pistols thing where they get a band to play on a boat while disturbing the public enough to get arrested. The getting arrested part was very crucial for Fletcher. The first year they did it, Fletcher doesn't consider it a success because it went off without a hitch. No cops involved whatsoever. Perfect day for punk rock on a boat. The second year rolls around, Fletcher is like, we gotta amp this up a little bit. We need to get arrested. So the next year, they got a boat, they got the band, and about 150 people together and set sail with nothing but degeneracy in mind. This time, apparently, it went particularly hard with people diving through the ceiling onto the floor, flipping tables and knocking each other down. You know, the works. This time, the cops were called and they got rolled, as Fletcher put it. Success. Doing something with the express intent to get busted is crazy. Every graffiti writer hearing this story has got to be rolling their eyes, baffled beyond belief. People of society are running for their lives. The second story that will illuminate the kind of band we're dealing with here has to do with making a sandwich. Fletcher has a unique ability of turning something as innocent as making a sandwich into a violent melee. You see, on Warped Tour, each band is assigned what is called a band wagon. It's a little trailer with a kitchen area and a place to chill. This story occurs during the emo phase of Warped. Fletcher took his bass player Randy into one of these emo band's wagons. Fletcher claims he was looking for the Rev, but when the emo band's tour manager came into the trailer, he told Fletcher it wasn't the Rev's wagon and demanded that the Pennywise dudes leave. Fletcher didn't like the dude's attitude, so naturally he began to make a sandwich with the supplies in their kitchen. The emo band's tour manager goes and gets the band that he manages to come and deal with this situation. The emo band, bless their hearts, try to confront Fletcher and Randy with enough audacity to knock the sandwich out of Fletcher's hand. Now, even though Fletcher was in the wrong, massive mistake, pal. Literally, what the hell are you doing, bud? This emo band was definitely caught friggin' around. So, Fletcher and Randy proceed to whip everyone's ass. Fletcher knew he was in the wrong, but the cops still showed up. And since Fletcher was still so full of alcohol, when a cop grabbed him from behind, Fletcher went to swing on him. But before he could connect on the cop, Fletcher got tased a couple times, and down he went. But it did take about 4 or 5 tases to get that mass of humanity to hit the pavement. To this day, Fletcher knows that he was in the wrong. The look of joy on his face when he tells this story says everything you need to know about the man. He's a big dude that enjoys every privilege that comes along with being a big dude. But the years of drinking, touring, and fighting will definitely take a toll on his gigantic frame as he enters his golden years.
Every day on your TV, on your front pages and try.
And that was only 2 stories of his insane road antics. Every band that has ever toured or been on a fest with Pennywise has their Fletcher story. But to be fair, Pennywise are much more than just Fletcher and his childlike buffoonery, bro. They're also known for their socially conscious and politically charged songs. The band singer Jim did an interview with Less Than Jake's Chris DeMakes on the Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Chris's focus on his podcast is to get band members to talk about a particular song they wrote. In the Jim episode, Jim decided to talk about their classic song, Society. In it, he reveals that even though Pennywise are from the same place geographically as the Descendants and the Circle Jerks, he was more inspired by bands like Dag Nasty and 7 Seconds. Going back to that track with that in mind, it's absolutely apparent. In the interview, Jim says, when you have a 6'5", 300-pound guitar player, it's hard not to think that he runs the show. Which he does. And depending if the alcohol is working that night, he either runs the show or destroys the show. And then finishes off the quote by saying, I love you, Fletcher. Fletcher also sat down with Chris in another episode of the podcast to discuss the song Fuck Authority. What I learned from these 2 episodes is that the Pennywise writing process is a collaborative one. Fletcher brings riffs and speed. Jim brings melody and lyrical themes. That's not to say that Fletcher doesn't bring vocal ideas and Jim doesn't bring guitar ideas, because they very much do. I'm talking primarily here. As the band progressed through the years, Jim says the songwriting is about 50-50 at this point, and in Fletcher's episode, he doesn't contest the fact, saying that Jim's episode was great. I must say, hearing Pennywise, in particular, talk about the art of songwriting is very interesting. We only ever hear about their fights and their ruckus. Pennywise is no stranger to tragedy either. They lost their first bass player, Jason Thirsk, due to mental health complications in 1996. After grieving the loss of their friend, the band decided to continue. They filled the low-end duties with Randy Bradbury. The band's relentless pace caught up to Jim in 2009 when he had to take a step back for a few years. In those couple years, the role of vocalist was played by Zoli Tegles. I am saying that name wrong, I'm very sorry. But he used to sing for Ignite. This era of the band would only last a couple years, and in 2012, Jim would rejoin the group. Pennywise seemed to have slowed down in the modern day due to, growing old, having families and stuff, that kind of thing. They haven't stopped, but they haven't necessarily released a full length since 2018. And from what I can tell, this is their biggest gap between records. But if even everything I just said was a lie, Pennywise has their spot in punk rock history due to this one iconic t-shirt. Every skateboarder in the 90s had this t-shirt, and still to this day it is a grail piece of merch. But speaking of history, as Jim does acoustic stuff on the side, Fletcher has had a huge helping hand in putting the Punk Rock Museum together with Fat Mike. The jam space at the Punk Rock Museum is modeled after the Pennywise rehearsal space, and when bands come through to play at the venue, they play in that disgusting, beer-soaked replica space. In my opinion, this life-size Pennywise diorama is the coolest part of the museum and reason enough for a visit. Not by me though. Never by me. I'm talking about other people. Other people should go. Just don't invite me. Pennywise is cool, bro. Fletcher is a legend. His relationship with the rest of the world is fascinating to observe. I'm a big fan. If you're watching this, Fletcher, are we still on for that fishing trip? Okay, Warriors, that's it for me. Keep sitting on twos and standing on business. Goodbye, see you later, and have a good one. Bad boy, salute. Oh yeah, 3-hour gang is in effect. If you're here within the first 3 hours, comment. I will reply. That's a bad boy guarantee. Okay, see you later.